The process of conforming within Mistika consists of two discrete steps. The first step is to make all of our target media available to the media browser. The second step is to run the supplied edit list against that media to create a timeline. So the first of those two actions is to import our media to the media browser. As we've seen before, if we were working with movie files, perhaps those generated by digital cameras, then we would import like this. We'd go to Import, we'd find our rushes, select a parent folder, and go Import all movies. So now in our media browser, we have access to those files. Anything in the media browser can then become a target for the autoconform process. So to do that, I'd go to the Conform tab, and initially I'll go to Mistika Clips, because those link files that we've just created for our media come under the general heading of Mistika Clips. So working our way down these list of options, I'll initially choose the EDL file that I want to conform from. And we can see we can get a readout of it here. Mistika doesn't have any EDL editing tools, so if you need to ripple lists or change lists, you'll need to use external software for that. This is just a readout so we can see what we're getting. And one of the things that we would use this for is to see where the real name information is. In this case, it's in this column, which is the normal place for a real name. Alternatively, it might be placed as a comment in between events. And in order to tell Mistika where to find the real name, we can use this function here. So we can tell it to find the real names in the real name column, which is where we have it at the moment. Or alternatively, we might see them as a clip name, in which case you'll see this between each event of the EDL. Alternatively, we can actually tell Mistika to ignore the real name altogether and simply go for a timecode match. In this case, I'll stay on real name. So going to the next option, if we want to, we can limit the number of characters within the real name that Mistika searches for. This is helpful if you've got a workflow where, for example, the original file name then gets appended with version numbers or what have you. You can set a number of characters in here in order to isolate just the leading characters, to avoid anything that's been appended to a name upsetting the conform process. If you leave it on 0, it'll look at the whole name. The next thing is to tell Mistika where to look for media. And in fact, what it's asking for here is to be told where are those link files that we've just created. So I just click root path, and in fact they are here. So I just click the parent folder. I can also further filter the selection of link files that it'll find by giving prefixes, which in this case I'll leave empty. I can also say what sort of Mistika clip the conform process is looking for. In this case I'm looking for link files. I can also tell it which timecode track to look at in case the camera rushes have multiple timecode tracks. And I can also further specify exactly where to find the tape name. For example, whether the tape name is in the file name of the link file, or whether it should be extracted from the header of the media file, that sort of thing. So having given Mistika all those clues as to where to find the media, I can simply hit Perform. And what that will do is it will create a new environment file, a new timeline. And by default, after the conform process, it's highlighted for us so we can see what it is. So if I now double click that to bring it up onto the timeline, we can see that we've got our conform, in this case from Red Epic files. So the key thing in this process is to be able to bring together all of the media that we want to use in our conform. The reason we do this is that our media might be scattered in multiple directories, even on multiple volumes or drives. But using these link files, we can bring them all together into a coherent order under a root folder, which we can then use as the target for autoconforming. So it'd be perfectly valid to create other directories under here with different link files pointing to different types of media, maybe of different formats or different resolutions. Providing they're under the same root folder, the conform process will try and find them. If when we conformed we disabled the tape name and asked Mistika only to find a match based on timecode, if it found a multiple match, it would actually stack the shots underneath like this. This is quite helpful if you're conforming perhaps from shots that maybe have multiple versions of VFX, where each shot has the same timecode, but you might want to load up all the various versions so far. Going back to the Conform tab, we initially went straight to Mistika Clips. If we were conforming from tapes, this tab gives us the options to create the clip files from which we can both capture events from tape and then later use them as targets for the conform. So for example, if I went back to my EDL and chose this EDL instead, then under clip name, let's call it tape conform, and I can give it handles and say whether they are stereo tapes or not, and click perform. So what happens here is now under our data, you can see we've got a folder called tape conform, which is what I called it, and that's full of clip events. And you'll remember from the VTR tutorial, if we go to the VTR, I could then simply go into this tape conform, select a range, and capture selected. So that would capture all the media that's been mentioned in the EDL. Having captured all that media, I could then use it as a target to conform the EDL and to actually make the timeline. So in this case, I'd make the root path my folder called tape conform, and the extension that it'd be looking for would be .clp. So now if I were to click perform, Mistika will create a timeline from the EDL and referencing all that media that we've captured from tape. If we're provided with multiple EDLs, then each time we run the EDL conform, we'll be given a new timeline. If we in fact want them all on the same timeline, for example, we have a layer 1, layer 2, layer 3 EDL, then we simply run the conform for each one and then just copy and paste each layer from one timeline to the next. Mistika also has the ability to conform using an AAF to access MXF media generated from an Avid environment. So the first thing would be to find an AAF file, and then simply hit perform. So as previously, Mistika then presents us with an environment file that it's created, which I can just open with a simple double click. It's possible that when you first load the AAF, you'll see a timeline like this, with completely blank media. The reason for that is the AAF is specifying a particular path to the media, and it might be that that's, for example, the path from, say, the particular Avid system that made the file. So we need to respecify that path from the Mistika, and we can do that using the relink tool, which is under import. So to do that, simply select any clip and open the relink tool, and then we use the media browser to direct Mistika to where the media really resides. So in this case, I know that it's in here. And I just pick any random MXF file for it to find. Doesn't matter, it's not the right MXF for that particular shot, because I'm just using it to demonstrate a path. So now I press perform, and it's telling me that in fact there are 52 clips on my timeline that don't have any media, and would I like Mistika to have a look through the timeline and see if the rule I've just defined will work for any other clips. So I'll say OK. So now that we can see that based on searching for media in that directory, Mistika has now found most of the other media for that AAF. For any that's missing, I could simply repeat the process to track down that media because it's probably in a different directory.